Hi, I'm Willem, and today we're starting a new series that's all about Jesus. What it takes to follow Jesus, what justice looks like the Jesus way, and what tools can help us focus on Jesus. We're going to watch a story about Moses, Elijah, and Jesus. But first, we're going to watch an 8-bit Bible story that will help us understand where in the Gospel of Mark these events take place. Check it out.
Today, our story is from the book of Mark. It's a story about a mountain, an over-eager disciple, and two very, very old guests.
When Jesus was 30 years old, he left his hometown, and after being baptized by John the Baptist, he began teaching. As he taught, word spread quickly and more people came out to see him. People heard he was performing miracles and healing sick people. He had healed blind people, deaf people, people who couldn't walk. He even raised people from the dead. One time, he fed thousands of people with just a few loaves of bread and a couple fish. Even though people were excited about Jesus' miracles and teaching, most people still didn't understand who he really was. One day, Jesus asked his disciples who people thought he was. Elijah, John the Baptist, a prophet, they answered. Then he asked them who they thought he was. Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." That was the right answer. Jesus was the Messiah, the promised deliverer, the rescuer who would save us all. For once, Peter had said the right thing. And 6 days later, Jesus helped 3 of his disciples see who he truly was. And that leads to today's story from Mark 9, verse 2 to 13.
Where do cows go for entertainment? To the movies. Hi everybody, my name is Jared. Nice to see you today. Hey, let me ask you a question. Do you have a friend or do you know anybody that tends to speak before they think or just jumps in and does something before they've thought it through at all? Jesus had a friend like that. Actually, one of the disciples that was closest to Jesus was like that. His name was Peter. Of the 12 disciples that Jesus had, 3 of them were really close to Jesus: Peter, James, and John. Peter was the one that talked before he thought. He jumped before he looked, and he just stepped in before anybody else could even move. Peter is an interesting disciple because he shows us what it's like to be a real human being, following Jesus the best way he could. In this series, we're going to be looking at the character of Peter and how he interacted with Jesus and what we can learn from him. As Peter learns more about Jesus, he learns more about God, and he comes to a really important discovery. And that leads me to today's big idea. The great people of the Bible all point to Jesus. Today's God story comes from Mark chapter 9. So Jesus had been hanging out with his disciples, teaching them, traveling with them, and then he took 3 of them, Peter, James, and John, up a mountain on a field trip. Now here's a tip for you. For the rest of your days, anytime you read in God's story about someone taking a trip up a mountain, be prepared because something cool or important is about to happen. So they were high up on a mountain, Jesus, James, John, and Peter, and something amazing happened. Let's read about it. As the men watched, Jesus' appearance was transformed, and his clothes became dazzling white, far whiter than any earthly bleach could ever make them. Then Elijah and Moses appeared and began talking with Jesus. Okay, so if you don't know who Moses and Elijah are, you might be pretty confused that suddenly 2 random dudes just showed up.
Hello.
Let me give you the scoop. Moses was a huge Hebrew leader who was known as the man who God gave his 10 commandments to. He lived about 1,500 years before Jesus. He would have represented the law, the 10 commandments, the ways of the old covenant of God with the people of Israel. Elijah was a massive figure in the Jewish religion. He was a prophet that did some amazing things. He lived about 900 years before Jesus, and he represents all that the prophets did and taught. Both of these guys, great people in the Bible, and all of the law and the prophets point to Jesus. Jesus is the point. Let's see what Peter had to say about this. Peter exclaimed, "Rabbi, it's wonderful for us to be here. Let's make 3 shelters as memorials. One for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He said this because he didn't really know what else to say, for they were all terrified. Remember when we said that Peter doesn't think sometimes before he speaks? Well, this is a perfect example. Hey, Jesus, let's just build tents for you and Moses and Elijah, and then we can just hang out here together all the time. Yes. Peter was the one who broke the silence. He just didn't know what else to say. The verse tells us that James and John and Peter were all terrified. Then, something else amazing happens. A cloud descends and covers all three, Jesus, Moses, and Elijah. And a voice from the cloud says, "This is my son, whom I love. Listen to him." This is really similar to what happened at Jesus' baptism. God spoke and said, "This is my son, and I love him. Listen to him." God is pointing to Jesus and saying, "Listen to him." So this amazing glimpse of God's awesomeness happens. Peter, James, and John were probably pretty shocked. They looked around, and suddenly it was just Jesus and them. Moses and Elijah had disappeared. So they walked down from the mountain, and on the way down, Jesus said to them not to tell anybody what had happened until he had been raised from the dead. But they kept chatting with each other because they didn't know what Jesus meant when he said raised from the dead. Can you imagine how amazing and confusing that would have been? It also shows that everything from the law and the prophets, the law, think Moses, and the prophets, think Elijah. They all point to Jesus. And that's why today's big idea is the great people of the Bible all point to Jesus. So as we read through the Old Testament, we see Jesus. It's our mission in our lives to point other people to Jesus. So, I've got a challenge for you. Can you live this week in a way that points other people to Jesus? Well, that's it for me. Thanks for hanging out with me. We'll see you again soon.
That was amazing. The law and the prophets all pointed towards Jesus. And from where we are now, we can see how amazingly everything was woven together throughout history. But did you know that we can also point to Jesus? Let's watch this story and you'll see what I mean.
I started doing magic when I read a book from my local library, and then I read another book, and they said, "Hey, Sawyer, you know tricks. Do a show here." So I did a show at that library, and then the other libraries asked me to do shows, and I accidentally started performing. What I do is a combination of sleight of hand, comedy, and psychology, and that just happens from practicing sleight of hand in front of a mirror for years and years and years and years. So what I do is fun and special, but it's not real magic or evil or spiritual in any way like that. A deck of cards is a pretty dynamic object. There's a lot of fun things that you can do with it in a very small space, so it's quite economical in that way as a performer. Time for a card trick. This is how it's gonna work. I will drop the cards like this, I will show you a card, and that will be your card for this trick. Good. Now let me tell you what's gonna happen. I will snap my fingers. Your card is gonna jump out of the middle of the deck. It will spin 10 times in the air, and I will catch it right here. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Whew! And I got your card, the Jack of Clubs. What? That's not it? Was I close? No? Okay. What was the card? 4. 4 of diamonds. Who picks that one? Ooh, the 4 of diamonds. And I found your card. Magic. This is your card. And that's what I thought your card was. If I wave it like this, now look. Here is the Jack, which means that on the table, the ripped up pieces is your card, the 4 of diamonds. Now, if I take the pieces like this and squeeze them, watch. The pieces actually go back together. And that's your card, the 4 of diamonds. I like to do magic with things that people have on them. Because if I bring out something, you think, okay, maybe that's some funky magician's toy kind of thing. But if I use your phone or your coin or your watch, you know it's normal, and I'm showing you something special with something that you already know about. This is my phone. This is my case. This is my face. What makes it special for me is seeing how much people enjoy it. When you've got like a big tough guy in the front row, and then he screams the loudest in the room, like, ah, and he's freaking out. That's really fun to see. But some people, you'll do it and they just go, and they're messed up for like an hour, and they go, I need some fresh air, and they walk out of the room. So people react differently, but it's a very fun thing to be able to bring to a group of people. There's satisfaction from people appreciating what you've done and saying, that trick was really cool, you blew my mind. But when they turn that onto you and they say, you're an awesome person, I want to be like you. And I think, well, you don't really actually know me at all. And I go like, whoa, 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 this is really weird. If you met me on the street, I'd be any other dude. But because I'm the guy on the stage, you're giving me this type of attention, which is very weird to get out of nowhere. I recognize that I've practiced a lot to develop my skill this way, but I also recognize that I'm kind of wired, that I have a natural gifting for performing, and that God has made me this way. So there's a relationship between me having to work hard, but also knowing that I have to steward the gifts that God has given me. And so I'm always wondering, is this the right thing to do? Am I gonna go this way or this way? And where do I feel God leading me? Let me show you something, but without my sleeves. I'll use this guy here. This is actually a coin. A 50-cent piece. If I squeeze it, it turns invisible. It's still here. You just can't see it. If I give it a rub, it comes back. Now, if I rub it on my elbow, something different happens. It also disappears, but this time it goes behind my ear. Did you catch that? No. You probably didn't catch also the pen inside of the coin. No? It turns back into the coin, back into the pen. And I also keep an extra coin inside the cap. Are you following? No. Let me break it down for you. This is actually all based upon optics, how our eyes pick up things. If I hold it here, you can see it. As soon as I bring it down, it disappears, but it's still here. When I do these tricks, I hope that I can show people these good gifts that God has given me, but also showing them through my life that God is amazing, that I'm doing tricks and these are fun, but they're not real. But God is real and God is amazing, and He's done this thing through me, and this is how I show it to the world. I'm Sawyer Bullock, magician ordinaire.
Wow, that was crazy. I don't know how Sawyer did that, but those tricks were awesome. But what I loved even more than the tricks was that Sawyer wanted to show people that God is real and God is amazing. In his own way, Sawyer is pointing to Jesus, and I hope that's something that we can do too, and we can show people that God is amazing. Let's break into our small groups and see what this looks like in our stories.